You wrote a book, 2019, Family First Composer, Proven Path to Escape 9 to 5 and Support Your Family, Composing Music for Film, TV, and Video Games. So why did you write this book and what inspired it?
Okay, the purpose of this book is I wrote this for me, to me, of the past. People like me, people in my similar situation who want to do good work. You would say it, God deserves better.
Yeah.
People who want to do good work and not sacrifice their family. Specifically in the music space, right? Composing music for these different types of media. And I wanted to give a little bit of a blueprint, not that my way is the only way, no way, but to just show my path. And the reason I say proven path is because there are certain clues left by successful careers of others that if you at least do these minimums, then you can get to a similar place. It doesn't mean we'll have the exact same financial outcome, the same number of projects or anything like that. There's still a lot of unknowns in the process. But I wrote this to give a blueprint for, hey, here's some pitfalls that I fell in.
Yeah.
Here's some holes that I fell in, and here's some scrapes and bruises and scars that I've experienced. You don't have to go through that. But also, here's a lot of wisdom that I've gathered by working with some of the best composers in the world. And here's some of the things that they all have done, and you can see the success that they've had.
Yeah.
So again, family first is really the idea. It's what if, here's the big question, what if instead of starting with your career and figuring out all the things that you have to do to be a successful composer, and then figure out how, as a second, to then fit your family into the mold of whatever time's left over. What if you did the opposite? What if you started with your family, figured out all of the needs for your family, meaning you're going to spend quality time with your spouse, you're going to spend quality time with your kids.
Unchangeable.
You're going to be with them, you're going to have a rest time. And as Christians, we would call that Sabbath, right?
Sure.
Having a Sabbath day, not working on the seventh day. The irreducible minimums, if you will. By having these structures in place, what if then, on the other side, now you have to squeeze your career into what's left? What would that look like? And that's the big question.
Yeah.
And that's what I faced. And my story, if you zoom back to 2019, at that time, I think we were still in the middle of foster care. I don't quite remember the dates. But for several years, my wife and I were foster parents, which led to adoption.
Yeah.
And during that foster period, we had around 11 kids in our home, at most 5 at a time. The amount of time investment is pretty extreme. Like you're going to doctor's visits, you're going to therapy, you're going to, at that time, taking kids to school and all activities. Like it's all the normal parent responsibilities and then some. And then also you're just kind of working through trauma. You're healing. Not to say that we've even healed 100% since then, but you're working through a lot of stuff. And at that time, my family life dominated my schedule. And it was something like 90% of my time was spent on my family. And then I had about 10% left. And I think at that time it was probably around 25 to 30 hours that I even had to work. Yeah. And so I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to support my family with a career? And this is a single income family. My wife was 100% working on kids and home. And that was the big question. Okay, how do we do this? And so that's what the book is about, is the practical steps of passive income versus active income as a composer, and all the different nuances that come with that, and maybe some of the beginning choices you might make on even simple things like software and gear, and what are some of the basic ways to start this journey that if you do have a 9 to 5, what basically within 3 to 5 years is the average, how do we start to make this transition? You're not just going to jump ship. How do we make this transition to start making income from this side gig and then turn it into the full-time gig that honors your family first and continues to honor your family first. Yeah. And side note, I now work less than then.
Wow.
And I have more kids because I have to. And
that's true.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Wow.
And I love it. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
My wife and I were looking to do that same transition as to going down to single income. And that's all of that stuff is on our mind. Cool. And it's incredibly hard. The world wants you and your wife to be working, and it collectively wants you to give your kids up. Oh. And you spend no time with them. Yeah. You get a couple hours at the end of the day with them after school or whatever. So we're looking into homeschool and that whole rigmarole. And it's
right
amazing.
There with you, man. Right
yeah, it's amazing, but it is a lifestyle change, and there are like magnetic forces that are trying to not make that happen. And if you're already in a career, and it's actually one of these questions here is like creatives, just more broadly, maybe not just composers. How do they end up? What situation are they in that they need a book like this? Like professionally, how do they end up in a situation where they're like, I'm stuck in a 9-to-5? Because it's escape the 9-to-5. Why do you think that is? Why do you think creatives end up having to do that type of stuff?
I want to clarify that not everyone needs to escape a 9-to-5. For many people, I'd say most people, particularly non-creatives, or maybe the creativity is a hobby.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
9-to-5 is probably the best thing for you and your family because it gives you clear boundaries and it gives you a sustainability that is perfect because now you have the weekends generally, unless you're like, have double jobs.
I don't know what. Yeah, exactly.
But generally you have vacation time. You have a lot of benefits that are suitable for a lot of people. But I'm specifically talking to the people who it's soul sucking.
Yeah.
It is not their calling, not their purpose here on earth. And there is a time and a place to have a 9-to-5 if that is you. But that's the whole point of this, is to help escape a lifestyle that's not designed for you. Yeah. That is not where you will thrive and flourish. And ultimately where your family will not thrive and flourish because you're not.
That's fair.
And I have to, in general, obviously there are men and women within our community, but it's like 95% men. So I tend to focus on the men and the dads.
Yeah.
Because I truly believe that there's a crisis in at least in America. Yeah. I'd say in our world.
In the West.
There's a crisis where the men are just absent. They're not stepping up. They're being passive, and they're not stepping up and leading their families. Now, if you don't have a faith, if you don't share the same values, biblical values of what it means to be a man and what it means to step up in your family, then maybe that's fine. Yeah. It's like I can't point.
That's a baseline issue that we would want to talk about first, probably.
But if you call yourself a Christian, if you call yourself a Christ follower, and you want to step up into what God's called you to be, which is as a man, as a leader of your home,
provider,
as a spiritual provider, as a obviously monetization, monetarily provider and safety and all that. I think there's a specific role that God's called us to. God deserves better.
Yeah.
And with that comes putting your family first.
Yeah.